This is the smallest reading month I have had in quite a while. Part of me thinks it's because I read 2 really big books, also had, Thanksgiving. Then the other part of me realizes, no, Nat, it's because you became obsessed with Roswell, New Mexico. Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video we are going to be doing my November wrap-up as well as the teeniest of December TBRs. Before we get into anything bookish, however, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments what was the longest book you read this month. So, as usual, oh my god, where did November go? It was here and then disappeared. How is it already December? I am still in shock. Time is a joke. Let's go over my stats for the month. As I said, this was my least productive reading month in quite a while. I read 5 books this month, but across those I read about 2,453 pages. Yeah, that was right. However, my average rating for the month was 4.7 stars, which is amazing. I did unfortunately have 1 DNF, and then for my genre breakdown, I only had 1 thriller and then 4 nonfiction books. So I actually participated in 2 readathons for November. The first was the Game of Tomes Origin readathon, and that was for the first 2 weeks. I completed They Never Learn by Layne Fargo, as well as The Woman They Could Not Silence for 2 of those prompts. The third was She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. Unfortunately, I did not complete this in those 2 weeks. In fact, I only really read this much of this month. This one will actually roll over because I do really want to read it and I want to partake in the book club discussion with my friends. I also partook in Nonfiction November and I completed all 4 prompts, so we will eventually get into all of those. First, however, I'm not really going to do a review for the one fiction book I read this month, which was They Never Learn by Layne Fargo, as I mentioned. I actually read this for my Killer Professors reading vlog and I have a pretty solid review of it in that, so I'm going to point you in the direction of that video right over here, as well as in the description. For that video, I also attempted to read The Maidens by 𝗖ście, and spoiler alert, this was the DNF from that video. So jump into the real action, which is all of the nonfiction books I read this month, and oh my god, I had some really good ones. First was The Woman They Could Not Silence by Kate Moore. This was actually on my 5-star predictions list. It lived up. It was amazing. Kate Moore's first book, Radium Girls, was actually probably my last favorite nonfiction book prior to joining BookTube, so whenever I heard about this, it automatically went onto my TBR. I adore Kate Moore's writing style for nonfiction. She manages to make the story feel fictitious, but you realize in the back of your mind that this is all true. She manages to interweave quotes alongside her storytelling, which really makes this book read almost like a thriller. The layout of the book also works with that because she will withhold certain pieces of information early on only to reveal them later, and they act almost as plot twists. Plus, there's all these like little foreboding ending lines and occasional cliffhangers at the end of chapters, which all of that together really gives this that fictitious, freaky, heart-racing thriller that you just can't put down. Even though this book was over 500 pages, and I will say it has a lot of information in it, I just never wanted to stop listening because it was so fascinating. This was the story of Elizabeth Packard, whose husband sent her to be institutionalized after becoming too individualistic. She also started to stray away from the religion he was practicing and was pushing her own thoughts onto her children, and he did not appreciate that. Well, once she ends up going to the institution, she actually learns that this is pretty common practice, unfortunately, and she starts to try and stand up to the doctor to ensure better rights for these women who are simply thinking for themselves. She was extraordinary, and the ride of her life is just fascinating. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I never heard about this woman prior to this book. She was such an advocate for women's rights as well as the rights of patients within mental institutions. She was also an avid writer, which meant that Moore had a ton of evidence and files to draw from, which is why it's all the more impressive that she manages to take all of these quotes and interweave them with her storytelling to unveil this amazing story. And honestly, the determination of Elizabeth Packard throughout it is just awe-inspiring. She was so desperate to free herself, but she was also desperate to free her friends and to ensure that they had better rights in the future and that these travesties weren't happening to other women. Unsurprisingly, this was on my 5-star predictions and it got 5 stars. I can guarantee anything Kate Moore writes in the future definitely gonna read it. I forgot to mention, this also completed the prompt of treatment for Nonfiction November. Next up is Yearbook by Seth Rogen, and this completed the prompt of collection, I believe. This is a collection of essays about Seth Rogen's life, and they span so many topics. It's crazy. Going into this, I knew I was gonna love it because Seth Rogen's comedy style is just one of my favorite things. It's fantastic to sit down, turn off your brain, not think about anything serious, and just have a great time. And that's really what this book is. If you don't enjoy Seth Rogen's movies, likelihood that you will enjoy this, not terribly high. It is crude, it is rude, there's so many references to drugs, there is way too much swearing, but oh my god, I loved every second of it. I highly recommend the audiobook for this one. Seth Rogen reads the majority of it himself, however, there will be occasional guest voice actors of random fame here and there, just doing little one-offs. I genuinely squealed when I heard Tommy Chong voicing a nudist weed dealer that Seth bought drugs from, but let's be honest here, it probably was Tommy Chong that he bought drugs from on a nudist beach. I also just learned so much about Seth Rogen throughout this entire story, and I think it really added to the entire down-to-earth appeal that he has about him. Some of these stories are really personal, but then others are just incredibly ridiculous and hilarious. This book feels like you are sharing a drink, or I guess blunt would probably be a better term, with Seth Rogen, and then trading random stories that just happen to pop into your head. Some of these range from experiencing anti-Semitism in a very uncomfortable long elevator ride to the craziest shroom trip ever and ending up in a different country. Literally across the board, I was laughing the entire way through. I highly recommend this if you enjoy his comedy style. 5 stars, 5 glowing stars from me. Next up is Helter, 𝗖ście by Vincent Bugliosi. I read this as a part of my Raid My Shelves for Nonfiction November, and I'm gonna be completely honest, it's probably gonna be a better review if you just go watch that video because you get more in-depth thoughts as I was reading through it. But this book was insane. Pretty much everybody has a passing knowledge of Charles Manson, and yeah, sure, I'm a true crime fan. I knew vaguely the story of the Manson family murders, but the amount of detail the story gives to that crime is so impressive and actually showcases just the amount of depth that went into the crime itself and then trying to solve it and prove that these people did this terrible, awful thing. It kind of gives you a whole new appreciation for just how evil Charles Manson was. If the size doesn't tell you, this has a lot of information. I think Bugliosi does a pretty good job of breaking it down into different parts so that you are focused on this section of the information first, and then the next time you're focused on this. So for example, you start out with the crime scene and then you go into the victims and then eventually you look into the motive. However, everything comes full circle to the trial when he is trying to bring Manson as well as his family to justice. With that all being said, this is a lot of information to keep straight though, and honestly, if you don't have an interest in true crime, if you don't have an interest in the workings of police investigations or the specifics in a courtroom drama, probably wouldn't recommend this to you. There are also some pretty graphic descriptions in this book, and it's very detailed, but I think doing that showcases just how truly dark the crime was and gives justice to the terrible things that these poor victims had to endure. In the end, I will say, as jaw-dropping as the story was, I don't know, it just didn't really have that 5-star feel, perhaps because it does feel almost textbook based in writing because it is so much information, and Vincent Bugliosi is a lawyer, so he has a very law industry focus on the crime in which he's trying to explain it to you. It can be a little difficult to read at times. Like I said, go watch the video for more explanation. In the end, I gave this one 4 stars. It was insane, but I'm glad that I read it. Lastly was Hunger by Roxane Gay, and I also read this in my Raid My Shelves, but I didn't finish it, so a full review here. Going into this, I expected it to be a pretty hard read. It is the memoir of Roxane Gay's life, and she goes through a lot. Specifically, this looks mostly at her relationship with her weight and food and the issues that have come up because of it and how her issues started. I really thought this was going to take me a long time to try and read through it, but Roxane Gay's writing is just so stream of consciousness and easy to blast through that I would look down and realize I'd read 50 pages and it felt like I'd been reading for 5 minutes. It seems like you're almost reading her diary. She's not sharing her life to to get pity, and she's not sharing her life to teach somebody a lesson. It's so incredibly raw and honest. I can't believe she was able to be so forthcoming with some of the things she talks about throughout the story, but at the same time, at different points, because of the serious topics she's discussing and how personal they are to her, she does occasionally come across as a little defensive, or almost like she's dissociating from what she's saying, but it's understandable because of how difficult to read this is at times. Unsurprisingly, the section where she discusses weight in the media was probably my favorite. I love hearing her discussion on pop culture and its effects on different parts of our lives. That was some of my favorite aspects in Bad Feminist. I probably would use this for the basis of a brand new thesis if I was still in school. Thankfully, I'm not. However, this was a really impactful read, and I'm definitely going to be thinking back on it for years to come, I'm sure. I gave this one 5 stars. I don't think it deserves anything less. All right, so that is it for my November wrap-up. Like I said, short and sweet this month because it feels like I barely filmed at all, even though I finished the wrap-up. So I mentioned at the beginning, we are going to get the tiniest little bit of a TBR for December in this video, and that's because for the most part, I don't really have a TBR. I'm going to be honest, I don't think I'm going to be reading anything new apart from She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. I actually think I'm going to spend majority of the month rereading. So first up, I'm going to reread and annotate The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I am doing this for a Christmas gift to a friend, and I definitely am not complaining about rereading the story because it's so happy and wholesome and sweet. It feels like such a warm hug. If you haven't heard about this, it is set in this magical world where there are these children with different magical abilities, and specifically we are following Arthur, who is a caseworker and goes to the orphanages where these children live and is seeing how they are being taken care of. He goes to the specific house in the Cerulean Sea and ends up finding a lot more than he was expecting. I love this book. I actually reread this in April. I think this might be the highest reread book on my shelves apart from the Charlie Davidson series. Speaking of, that's a good segue because now that I have the first book of the Charlie Davidson series again, I think I'm gonna try and reread it. Let me put that into perspective for you. This is just the first book. Here's the other 12. There's also 5 novellas. That's including the 2 I haven't read, which I talked about in my ongoing series video. So those would be 2 books that were new to me if I managed to get to all of that. I have no idea if I will. I have no idea if this is wishful thinking, but I will say whenever I read these, I tend to blast through them really fast. This story is following Charlie Davidson, who is a private investigator, but at the same time is also the Grim Reaper, which is really helpful for her job. I love this series. It is the perfect combination of paranormal, romance, and mystery. I am really hoping I can get through all of it because thinking back, I'm pretty sure the last time I reread all of these was junior year of college. So it's been about 3 years. Finally, the last ones that I would also love to reread. This many books though is very wishful thinking, and that's The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Goss, which is the first book in the Extraordinary Adventures of the Athena Club series. I've been really wanting to reread this series. I'm pretty sure I actually read it shortly before joining BookTube and I fell in love. This is a retelling of a combination of many classic horror and sci-fi stories, specifically often looking at the daughters of these characters and how they come together to form the Athena Club and start solving mysteries. I adored these when I read them the first time around. I thought it was fantastic that Theodora Goss took all of these female characters and made them such strong, empowered women who probably could have pissed off a few of the original authors. Definitely not Mary Shelley though. I think she would probably enjoy this series. But this is only the first book, and the second book I think is around 700 pages. Chances of me rereading both of these series is not high. I would love to do it though. We'll see. Alright guys, so that is it for today. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. I have my Goodreads, Storygraph, Instagram, and Tumblr linked in the description if you're interested in keeping up with what I am reading. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!